I recently read the story of a woman whose life was changed by an apology. About 15 years ago, Leilani Schweitzer's 20-month-old son, Gabriel, died due to errors made at a local and university hospital. There was a stark contrast in the way these hospitals handled the situation as Leilani tried to make sense of the tragedy she had just experienced. She explained in an interview several years after her son died, "The local hospital ignored me. By going silent, they didn't just humiliate me, they denied Gabriel his dignity. And after more than 8 years, that wound is very far from healing." Unfortunately, hospital administrators don't tend to respond to medical errors with openness and transparency, she said. They react with the legal version of fight or flight, deny or defend. But Leilani's experience with the university hospital was completely different. The university hospital didn't hide behind legal maneuvers and dismiss me, she said. Instead, they investigated, they explained, they took responsibility, and they apologized. They also learned from their mistake, discovered the weakness in their system that contributed to her son's death, and informed other hospitals using the same equipment so that future tragedies could be avoided. Leilani has still not healed from the wound she experienced by the reactive, defensive response of the local hospital. But not only has she experienced healing in respect to the errors made at the university hospital, she is now in charge of communication and resolution at that same hospital where her son died. It is her job to apologize and make things right when a tragic incident happens at the hospital. Leilani was deeply hurt and offended, but what she deeply wanted wasn't vindication. She wanted understanding and an explanation. The reactive hospital ignored her. They ignored her hurt, suffering, and her value as a human being. But the proactive hospital met Leilani where she was in her suffering. They acknowledged the ways in which they had contributed to her hurt and pain, and they tried to understand her situation and what led to the death of her son. Then they provided action steps to move toward reconciliation and the prevention of something similar happening in the future. This story makes me curious about something. When we offend another person, what does our apology look like? Do we respond like the reactive, defensive hospital? Or do we respond like the proactive, understanding hospital? Well, I'm glad you joined us for today's show because we're going to be looking at the anatomy of a proactive apology. You're watching One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring hope and purpose to many. Let's go meet our guest. We're here today with Bill Yaich, a counselor at Evans Counseling Services, and he's going to share with us the anatomy of an apology. Bill, it's so great to have you with us today. I'm really excited about this topic, and anybody I've told about it is really excited about this topic. So thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Brennen. You know, your introduction was really meaningful, right? Because that meaning that it had to that woman was healing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our apologies have no healing value to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've spent a lot of time, so tell us a little about your background in counseling and your life and how you came to the importance of how to apologize, in a godly way.
Sure. So starting out, counseling for me was always meant to be about marriage and relationships. But it morphed into a lot of different things. And through the process of learning how to be a counselor and then sitting across many couples, I found that there's something missing in apologies in general. Many times we'll hear, you say it all the time, but it just doesn't mean anything anymore. Mm-hmm. And I wondered about that. So I started sitting around thinking about how are people not apologizing properly? And can there be a formula for that would actually make somebody, a wife, think, oh, he is sorry?
Yeah.
And through that process, I thought I'd sit down and work through the process of thinking, what are good stages that people can go through to be that to their spouse?
Mm-hmm. I think that's amazing. And I know it's something, as we talked in preparation for today, just me thinking, man, I need this. And my wife will benefit from this. And I think we all need to understand what you're going to share with us. And mainly because it's the heart of the gospel, right? And it's the heart of God's story of redemption involves confession and repentance and seeking forgiveness. And so share a little bit about this idea of how an apology fits into God's bigger story.
Right. And actually, you kicked it off for me with the forgiveness aspect of it. If you think about it, a lot of what's happening within our relationships require us to seek forgiveness. But how can we do that without having that proper apology, right? And it's in that seeking that forgiveness that we become right in our relationship again. And if we think about who Christ is and what he's done for us and the forgiveness value that comes with that, but also brings us back into a right relationship with him as well, it just only makes sense that we could follow that model he's provided.
Absolutely, and that as image bearers of God, right, to reflect his nature and his character and to pursue him in that. I love that. Thank you, Bill. We're going to take a quick break. Stick with us. We're going to come back and dive into the anatomy of an apology more deeply.
Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device or go to our website, lighthousetv.org, for more information.
Welcome back to One Day Closer. We're here with Counselor Bill Yaich, learning about the anatomy of an apology. So Bill, we were just talking about the idea of how apologizing, forgiveness is the center of God's plan of redemption in this world. And so as we were talking about this in preparing for the show, you shared 3 really good questions, I thought, on how we can evaluate our place in that story and what it looks like to apologize. And you said, we can ask ourselves, how does God see me? How do I see God in the other person? And how do I avoid damaging the connection between God and me, between God and this other person, and between me and this other person in the way that I handle how I've offended someone? Can you thresh that out a little bit?
Sure. Actually, you started that off for me as well before when you talked about being an image bearer, right? And if we can't envision somebody that has value, it's hard for us to really enter into that apology with a good starting point. Now, if we can imagine that person as an image bearer of God, somebody that's really, somebody that is an heir to the throne, it enables us to then see how it is that we are damaging that image. And when we fully grasp that image, it's hard for us to be that person that is offensive to them, that's angry with them, that's abusive to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say, so we know this truth, every human being is created in the image of God with infinite value and dignity. Because of that, why is it so hard to apologize well? Why is it so hard to see the image of God in the other person more than we see, I'll speak for myself, my frustration or annoyance or, sinfulness?
Right. So let me ask you this question.
Yes.
How did you learn how to apologize?
That's a great question. I've never thought about it very deeply, so I'm assuming whatever I learned as I observed it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that's exactly it. So when you're wondering how does somebody get to that point of truly understanding how to apologize, we think back to our parents. Did they model it for us? Probably not. Did their parents model it for them? Probably not. We're told to say, I'm sorry. Right? And with that, I'm sorry, there's nothing after that. So we grow up just saying, I'm sorry. We say it to our wives, we say it to our friends, but there's no because behind that, right? So the modeling aspect that was missing is a generational thing up to us. Now you and I, there's no reason why you should ever say, I'm sorry again.
Yeah.
Right? So it becomes incumbent
Yes, I
upon...
don't have to say sorry again.
Okay, so you take that to your wife. Okay.
No, I'll keep that here.
Yeah, so, right, so we should never have to say, I'm sorry, without the rest of that.
Yeah.
Because now you know, right? And it's incumbent upon us to now be the bearer of this news to other folks.
And so we are often missing, I think we're often missing the because, but we're adding the ifs, ands, and buts.
Right, right, and that's part of these stages. Is one taking the ownership, not being defensive, allowing them to feel, not giving them a timeline to heal, right, in that process.
Yes.
And so, but the second we throw that but in there, it invalidates the apology.
Yeah. How do we, let's talk about empathy.
Sure.
And so, because I think that helps us to learn how to apologize better. And so how does empathy, what is it and how does it fit into a good apology?
Yeah, empathy is one of those things that I think I would think it should be innate in people, but it's not for some, right? We see somebody fall and we cringe.
Yeah.
Right? That's empathy. We just felt that. Right? So for us to be empathetic towards somebody, we need to step into and enter into their soul and look at life through their eyes. Right? Because when we're saying I'm sorry to somebody, without fully understanding the generational sin that has affected them throughout their life and their parents' life and their parents' lives. Here's an example. I'm a husband and I'm yelling at my wife. And she pulls back a little bit and I say, I'm sorry. Right? Now, if you think about that wife and you try to be empathetic towards her and you understand that wife's father was abusive. And prior to the abuse comes the yelling. Now, the husband starts yelling at my wife. All of a sudden, I become this representation of the abuser in my life. Right? So when we can fully grasp that and see through that person's life, which comes through sometimes decades of grooming, it then allows us to say, I am sorry. I think I just became that person to you.
So we're not just dealing with a blank slate. We're dealing with people who've been through many things in their lives, and learning how to be empathetic is learning how to understand how the way that we're responding is affecting them, not just in that moment, but based on what they've experienced, the hurts they've experienced in the past.
Right.
Yeah. Why is it, we talked about just the way we've learned it, but why is it so easy, do you think, for us to be reactive and defensive about apologizing?
Sure. I think it's just the opposite. You think about my history and all of the things that made me me, that makes me want to be defensive. But when we can get to the point where we're being empathetic with somebody else, all of a sudden it's like, this isn't about me. Yeah. But then I have to wonder, why though am I making it about me? And that's part of the redemption process, and especially in a marriage counseling type situation.
Sure.
You think you're counseling a couple, but what you're doing is you're counseling two individuals that have histories. And until those histories are resolved, it's hard to then enter into that back into that relationship to truly say, I'm sorry. I know what this means to you.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not just understanding the person that we've offended. It's also understanding what are the things that I'm dealing with that are causing me to be so reactive and defensive. When we talked, you shared apologies become much more effective when they're proactive rather than reactive. So I love how you phrase it. We need to have curious apologies. Can you explain that to me? I love that term.
Sure, let me try that. Yeah, so the reactive is we're being accused of something, or it feels like we're being accused of something, right? So that's the reactive. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. And I can give you an example later on about that. The curious part says that when I said something to my wife, her face sort of reacts in a way that I wasn't expecting that. because this was a simple thing to me, but my wife has that look. So the curious part of me is like, what did she just hear me say? Right? And in my household, we'll use those words when I see that in my wife or she sees it in me. She'll say to me, what did you hear me say?
Yeah.
And it's that curiosity that allows us to ask the right questions. And it's in that questioning that allows us to dig into the meaning behind what it is that they received from us through our words and actions.
Wow, that's powerful. And you have a great illustration about a pesky weed and how that allowed you to move into a curious apology.
Yes.
Tell us about that, because I think it's really helpful.
Yes. Yeah, this is one of those dumb husband moments in my life. I was outside. I noticed a weed in our herb garden area, and I pulled it out, not thinking anything about it. I went into the house.
You were being a good husband.
I was being good because I never pull weeds, right? And so I go into the house, and I'm smelling mint, and I was saying, why do I smell mint? And I was saying this out loud, and I said, oh, there was a big weed in the mint garden, and I pulled it, and my wife's face changed. And she said, no, that was one of my flowers. Oh. And I said, I'm sorry, I thought it was weed. I turned around, I went into my office, and you know what I was working on at that time? I was working on the anatomy of an apology.
Of course.
Right? A talk that I was going to do at Lake Champion. And as I was sitting down, I was thinking, you're such a dummy. Right? This is a perfect opportunity for you to do that. So what I did is I went back out into the kitchen, I looked at my wife, I said, you know what? When you saw dahlias at that farm last year, you fell in love with them and you wanted to learn how to grow those flowers. And what you did is you went, you learned, you put them in the ground, and then I came as they're ready to start blooming and I pulled it out, and you didn't get to see that beauty. I said, I am so sorry. Matter of fact, I'm going to make certain that I'm never pulling a weed without you, without your approval, right? And that's a simple example, right? But it's an example of somebody who should know that there's a proper approach to this, and I didn't even follow it.
And it's powerful though, because as simple as it is, listening to it just makes me recognize how terrible I am at apologizing, especially to my wife.
Right.
So let's get into, there were kind of three main aspects to your apology. Kind of, what were those?
Yeah, so actually there are 7 of them, right? So let me talk through them, right? That there's a prayer aspect, right? Because we don't do that. We don't go to the Lord and say, what just happened? What did I do? Right. The next one is acknowledging what you did was wrong. Stepping back, taking away the excuses in it, right? Because when we add that but or the excuse, it invalidates the apology, right?
Yes.
The one that says, take your time, because there are a lot of folks who will want to say, why are you not over this yet?
Yeah.
Take your time, allow them to just feel, right? And then lastly, the part that says, and this is what I'm going to do.
Yes.
This is what I'm going to do moving forward. These are the people that I'm going to be held accountable to. I want you to know that this is now on my radar. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be speaking it. And so, through going through that process, and there's so much more we can say about this, right? But going through that process, when our spouses hear that, all of a sudden it's like, I feel like I had a voice. I think they understand what this means to me. That I'm okay, that I don't have to rush through this process. And oh, by the way, he's reaching out to others.
Yeah, There's an action plan. I think that, and we'll have all these steps available in a great guide that you put together for people to access. So that's fantastic. Just the prayer, acknowledging it, and really the part that sticks out to me the most is that trying to really understand why this would be hurtful, and giving voice to it. Right. And then the action step. To say like, you are so valuable to me that I'm going to take steps to try and love you better. I love that, Bill. What are some fears and concerns that you've found people have with taking full ownership of an apology.
Yes.
And something like you just did.
Yes. And that's an important question, because having spoken about this topic with a group of men, and after that having men upon men coming towards me asking that very question, what if I perfect this and my wife just doesn't forgive me and just keeps carrying that pain? What do I do? Mm-hmm. And that's a hard question to answer. But the problem for them is, you're not trying to get her to forgive you. Mm-hmm. You're trying to be forgivable. Mm-hmm. And in that being forgivable, you're now working on your relationship with God.
Yeah.
And it's in that process that allows you to grow. And that's what's supposed to make you attractive. Yeah. But never with the idea that you're going to win her over or him over. Because this is not a husband and wife thing. This is just people in general thing.
It's really being open. Wow.
So I think the danger for men is thinking that this is going to be over just because I apologize. Mm-hmm. What do I do in the waiting?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that is the part where our growth really needs to come in play. And that's where, as long as we're waiting for them, we're not going to give you a timeline. You know what, God, I'm going to just lean into you, and I'm going to wait on your timeline.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. This has been so great. We're actually out of time, which is amazing. This has been so good. Thank you very much, Bill.
Thank you, Brennen.
Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned. We're going to come back and talk more about how we can apply this to our own lives.
Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device, or go to our website, lighthousetv.org, for more information.
Jesus gives us clear instruction on the importance of proactively apologizing to others in Matthew 5:21 through 26. First, in Matthew 5:21 through 22, Jesus teaches that our apology should be heartfelt and heart-driven. You've heard that it was said, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment." Jesus is making it evident that our heart attitude matters. Anger in our heart toward another person is as spiritually dangerous as murdering them, because that internal attitude is the motivation that leads to the external action. Likewise, our internal attitude while we're apologizing is just as important as our external actions. An empty "I'm sorry" isn't enough. Second, our apology should be a high priority. Listen to how Jesus continues in Matthew 5:23 through 24. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, you've sinned against them, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Seeking reconciliation with those you've sinned against should be at the top of your to-do list. Jesus is essentially saying, if you're on your way to church on Sunday morning to go sing here and talk about how awesome God is, which is incredibly important, and you realize while you're driving that you've sinned against someone and haven't asked for forgiveness, you need to make a U-turn and go get it worked out before you stroll into that worship service and start belting out how great is our God. That's how serious apologizing is when we've sinned against someone. And in Matthew 5:25, Jesus tells his followers to come to terms quickly with their accuser, the person they've sinned against, so that they can avoid disastrous consequences in their relationship and life. Brothers and sisters, confessing our sin and seeking forgiveness is at the heart of what it means to follow Jesus, because it's at the heart of the gospel. Jesus gave his life for us, taking the punishment of our sins upon himself so that we could be forgiven by God. So let's start writing a story of proactively apologizing with our one day closer to eternity. Here are some steps that you can take today to begin proactively apologizing tomorrow. First, get with God and ask him to reveal to you any ways that you've sinned against others but have not proactively apologized to them. Second, go to onedaycloser.tv and download Bill Yaich's guide, The Anatomy of an Apology. Bill has included 7 steps for a proactive apology and also an activity to work through that will help you grow in your ability to apologize in a more God-honoring way. Thank you so much for joining us for One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring Jesus-infused hope and purpose to many.